As many of you will know, Redfall was released on May 2nd, 2023 to rave reviews and lauded by critics and gamers alike. It was published by Bethesda Softworks and developed by Arcane Austin. The game lived up to every speculative pre-release review and delivered on all of its promises. Of course, that's what I wish I could say to you today. Unfortunately, the harsh reality is that the majority of people do not like this game. Critics have slammed it. Users have said it's a terrible, bland, boring, buggy mess. It's locked to 30 FPS on consoles and has mostly negative reviews on Steam. Saying that, it's not all doom and gloom. I did find some people who have since said that the game isn't quite as bad as it was first made out to be. Perhaps everyone had been too hard on the game upon its release, and future patches will resolve the myriad of issues that are plaguing the player base. Regardless of which side of the fence you fall on this issue, I thought it was worth making this video to showcase my experience with the game, what I liked about it, and what genuinely needs improving. This is in Defence of Redfall. Before I start talking about the general details of the game, I will warn you firstly, this will contain spoilers. I think it's essential that I talk about the story in the video, otherwise I would not be covering all aspects of the game fairly. One complaint I've heard in several media outlet reviews and podcasts is that the world feels empty and bland. I refute this claim given that the entire town has been overtaken by cultists and vampires. The few civilians that are still living are either in hiding or have been captured. The game does feature generic NPCs who are just called civilians. They don't have names because of course you wouldn't know someone's name just by looking at them. They respond in the default way when you talk to them and their interaction is base. It's the same for many other games where only main characters and some side characters would actually have further and interesting dialogue. Take games like Skyrim for example, where all of the guards in each town have the same dialogue. It's that sort of thing. Starting out, when you first start Redfall, you're greeted by a character creation screen. The game is designed for 1 to 4 players to enjoy cooperatively, and each character has their own set of unique abilities. The first major sticking point for me with this game was the lack of public matchmaking. The game released on the 2nd of May and no one I know currently owns it. This forced me to either try to make friends with random people on Xbox through Redfall Discord, or play the game solo. I opted for the latter and deliberated on which character I would want to play as for my first playthrough. As I was playing solo, I looked at the unique abilities of each character before I chose Jacob. Introduction. When you begin the game, a cinematic plays which is told from the perspective of a young woman who was brought to Redfall to be a blood donor for the sick and infirm in the town. Unbeknownst to her, the doctors that were taking her blood had much darker intentions for her and the town of Redfall. During this cutscene, we see the 4 protagonists of the game attempt to leave Redfall on a boat. The vampires control the tides. They cause the boat to crash. This concludes with a short in-game cinematic in which the main antagonist of the game, Black Sun, finds you after the crash and lets you know that you're only alive at this point because she wants you to be. She has grander designs for you, and her parting words were, "You'll never see the sun again." The boat serves as a short tutorial as you can collect guns and other items from passengers who perished during the crash or were eviscerated by the vampire tag-alongs that Black Sun brought on board with her. You make your way to the harbour area and you're immediately confronted by a horde of cultists who are searching for survivors. I opted for a stealth approach at this juncture under the impression that I wouldn't last long with a pistol against multiple enemy combatants with assault rifles. I sneak past the cultists and find a boarded up tunnel. You can smash through the wooden planks that are blocking your way by using the melee attack, so you don't need to alert the enemies when you do this. Great success. I continue through this tunnel and run into 2 more cultists. I finally pull the trigger and take them out with the pistol that I nabbed earlier, and sneak up the viaduct towards the fire station. The fire station actually serves as the first safe house in Redfall. When you arrive, it's under attack by Hollow Man cultists, but I'll explain more about them later. There's actually also a vampire in the basement that presents your first paranormal challenge in this game. Once you thwart the attack, you meet the first main group of NPC survivors. Each main safe house in Redfall has different stations for purchasing materials such as healing items, utilities, guns and ammunition. At this point, the game opens up and you're free to explore the neighbourhood. Redfall is actually split into 2 different maps and you start in Redfall Commons. There's 11 main missions in Redfall Commons, there are 10 neighbourhood missions, there's 45 gravelocks that you need to collect on your way around the world, and there are 5 side missions. All of this should be completed before you move on to the second map, as you cannot return. The gameplay loop of Redfall is actually similar to that of Borderlands or Far Cry. You kill enemies, you collect loot, you sell junk to people, and then you buy new guns. You can capture new safe houses to extend your control of the map, and you can fast travel between these. And you can also keep the vampires claiming neighbourhoods in a manner akin to GTA San Andreas by destroying their vampire nests. There are various special vampire types in the game that pose a more significant challenge than the standard variants. These are some of the most enjoyable encounters in the game, as they force you to adjust the way that you play to their unique abilities in order to defeat them. I'm just going to list off what each of these does. Some of them are less impressive than the others, but it's worth noting them all here. So blood bags basically have a huge blood sack on their back, and when you shoot them they explode. They're kind of like a boomer but not big and fat, and they don't puke on you, but if they are close they'll try and cover you in blood by exploding. The next one is a watcher. They have beams for eyes, and if you walk through the beam you get high alert to everyone around you and the beams hurt you. The watcher is kind of like a sentry, and you should try and take them out from range with a sniper rifle. The Sin Eater is a special vampire in that it actually eats the sin of others. These are just a story device basically. When you kill a Sin Eater, you actually release a memory. The memories are from the 4 main antagonists, and the memories will show you conversations from the past of those antagonists. The Siphon is a vampire that can siphon and drain your health away from you as long as they have a line of sight upon you. These can be particularly frustrating when you have no health packs left, because there's not much way to mitigate them other than to shoot them quick enough for them to not kill you. The next one along is the Shroud. The Shroud can actually cover you in a shroud of darkness, hence the name. First off, they will envelop you in darkness, then they start shooting purple balls at you which will damage you. The best way to mitigate this, I found with Jacob, was to go invisible, because this actually dropped the shroud, or to run away from the shroud's radius in order to be able to shoot the vampires. The next one is the Angler. The Angler acts kind of like Roadhog from Overwatch in that it can hook you in and pull you close. It can then bite you. These are more dangerous than the majority of the others, because once they hook you there's nothing you can do to escape that, and if your health is low enough you'll immediately die. The final special is the Rook. They don't actually come up that often, but they are so strong that they don't need to. The Rook is like the tank from Left 4 Dead. However, they only spawn once your Storm meter, which is unlocked halfway through the game, gets full. As you complete main missions, side quests, kill special vampires, the meter goes up. The vampire gods are watching you and they want to get revenge. They send a Rook to do their dirty work, and this is where it gets difficult. What I would suggest to do is to get UV lamps in the world and get the Rook to walk into it. This will freeze them solid, and then you can punch them to cause massive damage. Finally, there are named vampires. The named vampires generally pose a higher threat and are a stronger variant of the special vampires. The world. Redfall Commons is a picturesque place, which of course has been beset on all sides by the forces of evil, be it men or beasts. Redfall Commons itself feels more like a small town than the later burial point, which is a larger area with more varied biomes. It's even got like a Ferris wheel in the middle, and yeah, it's a lot wider and bigger, that second area. There are 4 main bosses in Redfall, and each one has something unique about them. The Hollow Man, in my opinion, had the best boss fight in the entire game, and was the first boss that you encounter. The fight actually takes place within a large atrium and requires constant awareness from you in order to survive the fight. You have to shoot the Hollow Man between the shields that spin around him. You also then, when he becomes invulnerable, have to destroy blood bag vampires that are keeping him safe. Whilst you're trying to destroy the blood bags, you're getting chased down by shades, which cause immense damage to you and chase you around the entire arena. I found it useful to have the cloaking device because it gave me a reprieve before I went on to try and cause more damage, and I could heal myself. Although I beat this boss on the first try, I still felt like this was a very enjoyable and challenging fight. Bloody Tom. This was by far the worst of the large-scale stage boss fights. Bloody Tom can summon 3 blood orbs, which he flings towards you. The trouble is, he isn't very good at aiming, and if you stand behind a pillar, they all just hit the pillar and they'll dissipate. They do leave like a blood mist around them, so if you walk into the mist you will get damaged, but as long as you stay out of it, you're fine. The main damage actually comes from a spear sword object that Tom can summon. If you're close enough, he can slam it down on your head. If you're further away, he'll throw it like a spear and it can stab into you. The problem with this is that it suffers the same problem as the blood orbs. If you hide behind a rock, that damage gets absorbed. As for the setting, he lives in a dark cavernous area with 3 large holes in the ground, and he pops up like a whack-a-mole. Overall, I felt Bloody Tom was basically a rehash of the Hollow Man. It was like another big boogeyman, and the Hollow Man had his cultist followers, Bloody Tom had his. Basically all of the main bosses had their own following, and they had slightly different outfits. Miss Whisper. This fight takes place in a wooded area with a great tree in the middle. Miss Whisper has the affectations of an angler special vampire, and she can pull you in for a bite if you don't avoid her tendrils. Upon taking a certain amount of damage, she again takes an invulnerable state, like the Hollow Man would. Although, in this instance, she builds a tower and you have to destroy 3 weak points in order to make her vulnerable again. While you're trying to make her vulnerable though, the shades are after you again, and you have to keep avoiding them. Again, I think Jacob's probably the best for this because he can just go invisible. This does add to the tension of the fight though and made it more enjoyable, I definitely think. Even though the mechanics are a bit recycled, it's a close runner-up to the Hollow Man fight. Black Sun. This is it, the final boss. The fight takes place in a very nightmarish aspect. It's not that dark and horrible, but it's kind of twisted and broken. The roads are smashed up, there's burnt out cars, dead people. The entire area is contorted into an arena of her design. The final boss doesn't directly fight you at all. Instead, you have to destroy 3 human tethers that have been sacrificed to her. Each one of these tethers you destroy will take 1/3 of her health off. The only problem is that as you approach these, you will be beset upon by normal vampires, a rook, and then one of the other 3 main special vampires. Once you've actually defeated all of these, and you destroy all of the tethers, it's a press E to win simulator. All you need to do is go down to the central area and drive a stake into the Black Sun's chest. Speaking on bugs in the game, I did notice that while I was playing, when I bought medical supplies to top up my healing, the numerical value while it was in my inventory would increase to 5 sometimes, but then I would go out into the game and see it was back at 0. This sometimes meant I'd spent money and not received the items that I'd purchased, which is clearly a problem, but obviously it's a code issue. It's something that Arcane can remedy in a future patch. I didn't notice anything game-breaking in terms of bugs. I did get some issues with the map not loading correctly and not being able to mouse look over it to explore. However, this was easy enough to remedy by going back to the main menu and reloading. In the secondary plot, the survivors in Redfall, of course, are your main group of allies throughout the game. Redfall Commons itself is host to Reverend Eva, the Doctor, Joe and his pregnant wife Anna. Each of these have their own backstory and side quests which give further insight into their lives before the outbreak. The main antagonist of Redfall Commons is the Hollow Man. Before he adopted this moniker, his name was Dr. Peter Addison. He had a daughter named Amelia whose blood he was using in experimentation. Through repeated use of Amelia's blood to further his research in parabiosis, Amelia ultimately died at the hands of her own father, the Hollow Man he became. This to me was the most disturbing story in the game. However, as you'll later discover, there are similar horrific fates that befall the people around the other main bosses too. In Burial Point, you will find that there are a second host of main survivor characters that you meet. They are also quite interesting. However, I just wanted to cover the secondary plot because that really stuck with me. That first encounter with the Hollow Man, he was a very interesting character. In the main plot, this is where the game genuinely shines for me, and I believe it's one of the main things that actually drew me into it. From the very start, you're introduced to a young woman who serves as the narrator for the introduction of the game, and she's present throughout. Her name was Grace, and she was duped by the scientific minds that caused the vampire outbreak in Redfall. You see, Grace had a unique blood, which the Beck twins, Claire, who became the Black Sun, her brother Charles, who she murdered and turned into a blood bag, Bloody Tom, the Hollow Man, and one other were all craving. Now, I say one other because he's named in the game, however, I don't actually know what happened to him. I don't think anyone does. The main missions of the game serve to forward the game rather than drive the narrative for the most part. However, during these missions you do find out crucial details about the events that transpired before the outbreak. As you pursue the main bosses of the game, you'll find Sin Eater vampires who carry recorded memories, past conversations that the antagonists have engaged in. Here you can see firsthand how they duped Grace, lied to people, killed people to get what they want, and ultimately became the monsters that they are. There are 100 gravelocks to find throughout Redfall, and they serve a dual purpose. Collecting all 100 of them will give you an increased recharge of your ultimate ability, but each gravelock actually contains a voice echo from Grace. These were my favourite touch in terms of her story, as I felt like I was uncovering more with each breadcrumb that I found. Every entry appeared to be unique until I reached the high 70s where they started to repeat. This was the only negative I could see in this system, as I'd enjoyed the collecting up until that point and I actually wanted to hear more. Now, upon defeating the Black Sun and completing the game, you do come face to face with Grace herself, or the Gateway as she's come to be known. She actually died on the table when she was being exsanguinated by the antagonist of the game. However, she forced her conscious being into the very blood that was extracted from her body. This caused her to live on in every vampiric creature that they created from her blood. As you step into the light, a cutscene plays in which Grace affirms that although Redfall is now safe, it's forever changed. The vampires are gone, but things will not go back to normal, and someone out there still has Grace in some form and needs to be stopped to prevent a further outbreak. This setup for a sequel I think would have been welcomed had the game not been met with such negativity that it has seen so far. I now wonder if we'll ever receive the sequel given this. Overall, I think Redfall does genuinely have solid foundations. There are some issues with the game, but I think that these can be resolved with time. Unfortunately, as was the case with games like Cyberpunk 2077 and No Man's Sky when they were released, the backlash is long-lasting and can put some people off ever returning to the game. I would actually rate Redfall a 7 out of 10. It does what it set out to do with its story, The gunplay and gameplay feel good. I was engaged through the entire experience. The thing that let the game down for me were the bugs that I did experience. But they didn't stop me from persisting and completing the game because I felt compelled to know what happened. I finished the game on the highest difficulty available when you start out, and I did find some parts of the game challenging because of this. I think that playing solo also weighed into that because I didn't have backup, but there you go. I finished the game at level 21 and maximum is level 40. So the main replayability would come from wanting to finish a skill tree with each character, I think. My closing thoughts today are that Redfall is not the best game in the world and it doesn't need to be. It is, however, a competent single-player story-driven adventure which I can only imagine is even more fun when you play it in co-op with friends. The bugs and issues with the game can be resolved, the core premise will remain, and this is what I took away from the game. The story touches upon just how depraved humanity can be, what lengths people will go to in order to get what they want, and it does that well. As I said before, if we never see a Redfall 2, I do think this would be a genuine shame. I hope Microsoft can see the potential for a sequel and they don't immediately scrap the idea. Only time will tell. For now, I'd say you should give this game a try. Get it on Game Pass and play it on PC if you can. If you can't or you're worried about bugs, then wait for the future patches. Of course, the console version will have higher than 30 FPS in future as well. As in the game's plot, all is not lost, and I do think there's genuine enjoyment to be had in this game. That's pretty much it. I hope that at least some people will give the game a fair shake and see firsthand whether it's enjoyable in your own view, rather than just taking what anyone else has said on face value. That being said, I'd like to thank you for watching this and sticking with me if you've got all the way through the video. I don't always do these long form videos that are kind of an essay about a game, but I do enjoy doing them, and I think that some people have reacted quite well to them. I'm not sure when the next one will be and what it will cover, but I'm sure it will happen at some point, or I'll just make something totally different. But until then, thanks, and I'll see you next time.
Black hole stuff.